This is Hillyer Art Space, a part of International Arts and Artists. They have graciously allowed us at Millennium Arts Salon, and they are hosting this exhibition, dual exhibitions. The other two rooms have the exhibition that Lauren will talk about in a few minutes. She's the co-curator there. And then in this room is the work of Imar Lyman. Okay. So we represent Millennium Arts Salon here in Washington, D.C. in our partnership with Hillyer Art Space. We are dedicated to advancing cultural literacy through the arts. We are in our 23rd year, and we delight in the opportunity to engage in the salon, meaning have an artist usually interviewed by another luminary to present their body of work, the arc of their lives, as a part of their contribution to the art historical narrative. We're very pleased about that. There happens to be today, this morning, Mark Jenkins wrote a review of these exhibitions, these two. I commend your reading of those. They're fascinating. And really pick out what I think is the essence of these exhibitions. So with that, please allow me to hand it over to Lauren Davidson, who is guest curator here, and she will moderate discussion this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful conversation. I already know that it's going to be wonderful. As Mel mentioned, my name is Lauren Davidson. I am the principal curator, independent curator for my company, Museum Nectar. And I am the co-curator for Imar's show here, this exhibition that we're sitting in, as well as the ties that bind. Jarvis DuBois is the other co-curator, and hopefully he'll be joining us momentarily. But tonight, we are focused on Imar Lyman and his amazing print work that we're surrounded by. And we are very, very fortunate to have Professor Emeritus Haile Gerima, who is the owner of Sankofa Bookstore and Cafe on Georgia Avenue. He's a long-standing pillar of the community, as well as a filmmaker, for which you may be familiar with a few of his films and documentaries, in particular Sankofa from 1993. Is that right, sir? Yeah. And we'll learn a little bit more about the relationship between these two luminaries. I'll take your word, Mel. And just as it relates to the inspirations that Imar has had over the years to create these prints. And without further ado, I would like Imar and Professor Gerima to introduce themselves.
Well, hi everybody. I don't have much to say by way of introduction. My name's Imar. I know many of you, so it's great to see you. Thanks for coming, and thanks for everyone who supported my artwork and continues to do so. I'm an artist.
Yes, Imar, you are an artist. And just to tag along to what he said, obviously Imar is a master printmaker as well as collagist. And we'll get a little bit more into the details of his work as we have this conversation. Professor Gerima? Oh, you have a mic.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad I'm here. I usually don't like to go nowhere where I'm not actually where I have to be. This is a forced migration from my community by this guy. And it's because of the kind of relationship we had for a long time. And I'm very happy to be here, and I just hope I will contribute to my, further understanding of Imar, but also my what I gained from him as a young man who is a practitioner of art, how much is also an inspiration for me in my editing rooms where I reside most of my time. And basically I'll see where we're going with this.
Wonderful, and we do appreciate you coming out of your comfortable place to engage in this conversation. And why don't we just start right there? How did you all develop this wonderful relationship, and when did that start?
Okay. Well, it started a long time ago. Some friends and I, we had a vegan restaurant there on Georgia Avenue back in the day, and there was this crazy guy up the block that I never understood what he was saying, and that's how we met. And first of all, he is totally correct in saying that he doesn't come out. So I'm really grateful for you coming and doing this with me, and that means a lot. And also I always tell you, but I'll tell them that I give you credit for all this work in this room and all the work that is elsewhere. The bigger pieces. Because, through the years, I would say, oh, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And he's like, I don't want to hear about that. Tell me about your art. Yeah, well, I just cured cancer. Yeah, that's great, but tell me about your art. I don't want to hear about that. So he's always helped me keep the flame alive and nurture the flame, and to the point where now the flame, it'll never go out. It's an inferno now. So I'm thankful for that. And yeah.
And Professor Gerima, what did you see in this strange character that inspired your interest in his artwork?
Well, I was at Howard, and a lot of young people come and go. Howard is like a river, and young people come through, pass, and there's certain young people you can't forget that have impacted on you. His group, Bradford Young, and his other group that he was talking about, the vegan restaurant group, they're very conscious, aware, very concerned, caring, and so that's really the beginning. And I also knew in the group how much he cares. Caring is what I always remember, that he cares. And anything he did he's trying to do something for, the transformation of black people. And I've always believed him. Yeah. It's not a stage he was going through, but it was inculcated, I think, from his earlier genes, genomics. And so when I met him, I have noticed that, and also it's also, these are the young people, him, Brad, Chad is over there. These are young people who cared, not only cared, but they were also an inspiration to me in my own work. The fact these young people exist, has implicit role in my own work. They may not think of it, but it's very complementary coexistence.
Well, I'm talking about your work. For those who may not be familiar with your work, I'd really love for you to just talk a little bit about your inspirations for your filmmaking and how that connected with the same mindset of Imar and his contemporaries and the other students.
Well, it's basically at UCLA, the so-called LA rebellion, but it's white folks fixation. You know, they fixed that name on the whole group of the LA rebellion stuff. But Tony K. Bambara coined it for a different reason, etc. So it's a long story, but it's a group of black people, and we were like, at a time, Latin Americans, African filmmakers considered the camera as a weapon for the transformation and evolution of society. We were a group of people, Chicanos, Native Americans, Africans, African Americans, got together to form complementary energy, to inspire each other, to find our own cinematic identity. So when I came, this is also the other group that was improvising to find themselves.
Right. Right. And I think that's really interesting.
Can I just
Yeah.
revise my former answer? So, you know, but that's not when I first met you, technically. I went to Morehouse, and I was in a phase where I also didn't go out. I didn't do anything. I didn't watch TV. I didn't go to sporting events. I didn't go to movies, clubs. I was on something else. You know, we were, I don't know what we were, but we didn't go anywhere. we were studying, you know? But Sankofa came, and we went to, in the Highlands, where the theater had been reserved for that event. And I remember watching the movie, and this is a feeling I have with a lot of great art. I didn't even understand it, you know? And a lot of your films, like a lot of them I've only seen once, you know? Not because they're not good, but because it's so much in it that I have to gear up to see it again. You know, I have to, like, if you're really connecting with it, then you can't just passively watch it and not be touched. If you're not really connecting, you watch it all day long. You know, and we're so used to these things that just we don't really mean anything, like styrofoam for the mind. But this isn't that. You know. And so, as he said, it was a weapon. You know, and so I think that DNA is definitely part of what I'm trying to do. You know, I'm trying to weaponize the craft, you know? I mean, there's people that do art for no reason. There's people that do art that are unaware of the reason why they do it. There's people that do art for negative or self-aggrandizing reasons, and there's people that do art for, like, trying to activate people, you know, trying to make people harmonize with their true intention. And so I think that's what you do, and I think I'm in the same lineage in that sense, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think in terms of your processes, you differ in a way. I've watched you in your studio, Imar, and you're very intentional about how you approach your collages and how you approach your print work. And in learning more about your process, Professor Gerima, I don't think that you approach it in such an intentional way as far as process. You kind of allow it to be what it becomes. Would you say that's true?
Well, he's heading that way too. He's heading that way too, because it's an imperfect journey. All of us will embark on an imperfect journey. If an artist is going to truly grow, there's that meandering, but it's going towards that. When I started, it's almost the same, but there's a process in terms of his work. For me, I see the bush cow, like Bush Mama in my film, bush cow in his work. And when I was he would, for example, he would come say to me, I'm doing just, let's say, Josephine Baker. And all I know about Josephine Baker from cinema is negative stereotype. Not only stereotype, her own role in it is this banana dancer to, Euro-American white fetish. And then I said I wouldn't say that to him. I'd just have in my head saying, what is he going to do with Josephine Baker? And it's often you tango. What do you do with black gift and talent that is completely demonized, destroyed by white supremacy? How do you convert that visual stereotype into a constructive? And then I see the Senegambian Josephine Baker within the bush cow, that bush cow in the West African kind of mythology that I studied a lot when I was doing Bush Mama. And so that to me is an interesting transformation of, this is what's called appropriating, possessing back Josephine Baker from all this, white supremacist colonization of her gift.
Right.
You're making me think of something. You came to my studio when I was working on Frederick Douglass, the big one, and I had Octavia Butler. I had the sketch of it, and I remember you saying, well, I knew her, and it was always like something had been taken from her, because to tell you the short version, they didn't put her on the covers of her book. They didn't put a picture. And Mind of My Mind, which I kind of was basing it on, they put a white woman's picture as the protagonist of Mind of My Mind because they thought black people didn't read. And so I had put a 14-year-old Octavia Butler as into the cover. And I remember you said, basically what you're doing, I think you're correcting, or you're trying to restore. You're trying to restore people to their proper place. Something to that. That's not exactly what you said, but basically you're trying to restore people to their proper place. And you were looking at the Frederick Douglass. This is the big one, and you were saying a lot of times what they do is they neuter our heroes or curate them into a certain thing, which is not necessarily what they are. And it's totally true. If you read what Frederick Douglass wrote or said, you're going to get a totally different impression than you get from the curated little tidbits that they give us. And so that thought stuck with me. I mean, and makes me think about, like, maybe I am trying to balance it out. Maybe I'm trying to put some of these ancestors at rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you take Toussaint Louverture, in my view, for example, we've seen a great deal of Toussaint, A lot of painters have done it. But this speaks to me because I come from Africa, and I'm seeing that fetish Congo, the Congo-Angola interpretation of, the Maroon warrior. And so I see that genomically maybe coming through your fingers and gifts to do that. So you restore and reclaim the Africanity of even a franchised. He's always Francophonized. You've Africanized and restored him. So for me, sometimes this could be just a subconscious gift that we always neglect. The way in jazz has been neglected for a whole time, its African essentiality is always diminished. And to me, I think that's the best. I wouldn't come here. I would. Most of the filmmaker students of mine, I wouldn't appear with them. Would kill me. but in your case, I just want to let you know. I'm trying to do now Ethiopian-Italian war movie with only a footage that Italians took killing my people.
Right.
So how do you take a fascist cinematic lens and glass and then use it because your own people didn't shoot the film? And so I'm tangling with that every day to take a shot white people did killing my people, Italian. And then I say, okay, how do you convert this lens to do the, not its inherent objective, but can you bend it around to say something that you want to say, that my father was not able to say.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing the same thing. So I identify with that.
So actually, when you're talking about how you're creating this film and you're trying to recreate something that, and reclaim it, and I know that you have, I don't know if you came up with the language to describe your method of interviewing for your documentaries as stoking the fire. And it really reminded me of The Fire Next Time by Baldwin. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means? And I believe that you're doing the same thing, even if Imar, even if it is in figures that have already passed, you're approaching it in the same manner as you do in your documentaries.
Well, my mother came up with it. Really, I stole it from my mother. My mother, in where I grew up, I came to America after I was 21. But I was a colony of America, and I was trying to recollect my own origin, my mother, my father, my grandmother, what they do. And one of the things my mother does every morning is, every night she covers the fire with ashes, and then in the morning she strokes the ash off, and the flame comes. It's how they preserve fire from Nilotic time in that area. And so I noticed in America how black people are dishonest for many circumstantial reasons. They don't really say that it should be said. And I felt those were the ashes that covered the flame. Then I learned by going to especially Southern black folks, all I need is stare at them, and they begin to tell me.
Right.
When we did the film, The Wilmington 10,
Right.
I trained my students, my crew, about this thing called stroking the fire. Black people, they do not usually shove a microphone and camera on them, they lie, they start to lie. It depends who's holding it and what they think they're asked to be said. But the more you plead with them as a generational transaction need, and you stare at them and tell me more, they would say things that maybe you as a young person may not think it has something to do with your film, but it would be the most bombshell that you could get out of people. And this is really Fanonian. It's oppressed people throughout history. There's always this thing of oppressed people somehow lying this moment just to get by and mislead the world in the end and their own generation.
But it's also a protective mechanism as well. You're protecting, the personal information or the personal relationships, right?
But that even depends on the epoch you live. For example, in slavery time, I can understand, this whole idea of, what is inevitable for facing the truth. The violence, yes, but at a certain point there is this, even the idea of the two personalities, the so-called African Americans navigating with two personalities. Right. At a certain point, the second personality has to be killed, slayed.
That's true.
And they have to face, white people in America and the world should face this truth of what you feel. Right. Otherwise, you're being dishonest to them, to yourself, etc. So it depends on what historical moment. I understand it, where and how. But now it's sometimes personal gain, personal exploitation. I don't want to lose my fame. I don't want to lose the status I have, the money I have. So it's become a class thing now. But it's counterproductive. But at a certain point, as you said, it is a way of also protecting. That's why a lot of young people almost discover their own parents late, after they pass, after they die.
Yeah. And Imar, with that in mind, and I'd specifically like to focus on the James Baldwin piece at the back of the room. In this thinking about this concept of stoking the fire retrospectively, can you speak to that?
Oh, well, with a lot of these, I don't really like to do people who have been depicted a lot. And James Baldwin has been depicted a lot. Frederick Douglass has been depicted a lot. A lot of these people have been depicted a lot. So basically, unless I have something to add to the conversation, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think this might be something that I learned from you and didn't know I learned from you, but it might take me years, you know. I mean, look at your maroon project. You've been, you know, years, decades, really working on it. And, you know, so what I would do, or what I did in this case, is embark on a study of him, you know. And I don't read a whole bunch of books about James Baldwin. First thing I would do is read what he wrote.
Yeah.
You know, we always want to like read the new biography of Frederick Douglass, or well, right? You know, what about reading what Frederick Douglass wrote? You know, you're giving away the gift that we can have at least communication directly with that mind. You know, unfiltered, and in that case, you know, there's a lot of these pieces have this, are part of the Sacred Cow's body of work. So the idea is that, you know, how in some places, like in Africa and in India, the cows are sacred, right? So what if black people here were like sacred cows? You know, what if when one went into a Starbucks, everybody was like, oh no, take my seat, take my seat. And can I get you something? And what if when you sat in the middle of the street, if someone sat in the middle of Connecticut Avenue, the cars would just slowly go around them, you know? And so it's just a flipping of the conception, right? And so you'll see that, like, I thought about this when you're talking about the francophoning of Toussaint, how, you know, the horns are in his hat, you know, and people can look at that all day long and never see it, you know? And so, you know, I think that you're right about the path in general, because I'm on Bush Mama, so to speak, but abstraction is the highest, and that's why all the masters in there, you know? And so you kind of see that playing out a little bit here. And as far as the James Baldwin goes, like a lot of people say, the eyes in my pieces draw them in, you know? And, well, what about James Baldwin's eyes? You know, he doesn't actually have any eyes, but you want to see them so much, you know? And you see them, or I'm speaking for myself, I feel like I see them, but I don't see them, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to see them. And so...
why did you choose to do that? Why did you choose to portray him with shades on? And
well, it was, first of all, it's based on a real picture, but it's him in a way that people haven't seen him, you know? And so all of this has to have something that is, you know, there's some layering to it, right? Like most of them are collage in the first place, so there's a collage. As you know, Lauren actually has the collage original of the Frederick Douglass piece. And so in terms of process, there's a layering. So in terms of significance, there's a layering. And, you know, I just like that, like anything, people can approach it and there's different levels. Some people say, oh, it's beautiful. So they've reacted to the design and so on. And then maybe more so with the bigger ones, someone that might get closer and look at all the clippings and stuff, and then they get into the significance of it. But then there's another level that people aren't really aware of, and that's what is really going on, is an energetic level. They don't realize that what they're really reacting to is that.
The fact that most of these were original collages. Talk a little bit about that, because for those who are not familiar with Imar's work, they're much more complex in a way, from the clippings and things that you use. If you'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the only two in this room that were not collages in the first place would be that one right there and that one right there, the Brianna and the Ramatulaye. And basically those would be more line work, and so they're more closer to some of my sketches, you know. And then, you know, I've been experimenting around trying to bring, well, at different times, sometimes trying to bring the intimacy of the sketch into the finished piece, and sometimes not. Sometimes trying to make it be something different.
Yeah, and the spirituality aspect, because I get that, just as you just said, even though some of these figures that you focus on are figures from entertainment or sports or authors, you know, cultural figures, you seem to find the spirituality in them. And I know that spirituality runs through some of your work as well. Less so the documentaries, I would imagine, but the full films. Can you talk about how spirituality impacts both of your work?
Well, for me, I would say spiritualism in general could be just benign, and it could be just a commercial culture. But to me, resistance is spiritual. I think resistance is the highest form of a true spiritualism, where one is alive and honest and forthright. I think in James Baldwin, that's what the fierceness that often is, you know, often most folks, I think, especially white populations, come to James Baldwin through his writing, in a sense, meaning his writing scares the hell out of them.
Right.
But his physicalness never scared out of them the way Jim Brown would scare them. But to me, this says the opposite. He takes this fierce man, you know, man who has written fierce artwork, etc. So for me, the resistance of this is what when I first saw it was James. To me, his resistance is captured, and that itself is spiritual. To me, without resistance, there is no spiritualism. It's a dead body, a dead everything. And this is where society wants to, you know, you sit around, you stare, you meditate, Buddhism that way, Buddhism this way. No, fight. When you fight, you are spiritual. Spiritualism comes when you struggle against wrong, against injustice. There is no compromise there. So for me in my work, even black people affirmed it when I did. Well, in fact, this is where I learned it. When we did Sankofa, my wife and me co-produced it as a resistance movie. And black people there said it was a spiritual movie across the world, all the way to South Africa. And then I said, resistance restores spiritual displacement. And it was complementary. So I learned from there and started to study more about these things and what they mean to me in my work.
Yeah. How about you?
Me? Well,
beyond the cows.
yeah, beyond the cows. Well, even though I have this room full of these famous people, you know, it's not really about that, you know, and it's more so about what it can stoke in a person, you know, that, because I remember there was one, you know, famous person that I mean, first of all, I don't do commissions, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not available for that. It has to be something that I want to do, and if it corresponds with what somebody else wants, then great. But there was somebody that I was going to do, and actually Brad and I was debating about this person, and he was like, it doesn't matter. Basically, if that is something that people can hold on to and energize them for the fight that you're talking about, then great. So like the actual fact, it doesn't matter, like, and so with a lot of these ancestors especially, they haven't been properly documented. They've been curated out of existence to something that they didn't even stand for.
Yeah, but also I think in terms of like how much of it is the artist in charge?
Mm-hmm.
How much of it? It's a very important question to bring into this kind of discussion, because for me, art, arrogance, and ego destroys the very object of art, because you enter into this individual monstrosity, I think.
Pursuit. Yeah.
But how much do we also know? Some of it, we're just, for example, an African American woman from Harlem said to me once, she's 90 something, she hugged me, thanked me for my film, and she said, "Don't think you made this film, you're a vessel." And I think sometimes we forget the vesselness that, yes, we think we're in charge and we're doing Tucson, but what is the genomics that also propels that idea into you?
Yeah.
So for me, the creative process, often the artist is a possessed entity how else, I know it could be deformed, capitalism could take over and make it commercially, exploitation, culture, etc. But when initially these things start to propel you
Right.
in physical manifestation that you think it's in your jurisdiction, but there's other things that are not dead, that are also living, that pushes you or genomically participate in your creative process.
Yeah.
When you think like that, it just, one becomes humble, and then gifts start to come more.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I look at my sketches. I look at all of this stuff, but I look at the sketches especially where it starts, and I say, I look at them just as amazed as anybody else. Like, I look at it like, well, I can't do that. Like, I don't know where it came from, and just like, I know I told you this before, but like, I was doing art, and then one day, I didn't get better. I just was better. It wasn't no kind of progression.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, and the same thing as far as people wanting my art. Like, it was just like one day a switch flipped and everybody wanted my art. Like, but there was no this. So sometimes when I'm trying to do something, it's not like I'm trying to create something new. It's like I'm trying to remember something old. It's like I'm trying to see through the fog. It's like you kind of see it, just make it out.
Yeah. In this concept of resistance through work, both of you have dealt with social justice, and ultimately that's what all of this work, at least in my thought, is really about social justice. But in particular, the Breonna Taylor, Justice for Queen Breonna, I'd love for you to talk to us about that, because really it's quite different from the other works, not only in the way that it's created, but also why and how far it reached and everything about it. Yeah.
So I was driving back brooding about the whole situation. Never thinking it would come so close to home. And I was saying, you know, you wouldn't even do that to a dog. Like if people did that to a dog, people would be outraged about it, right? And I said, well, what if instead of the lowest, she was the highest? So can you imagine the outrage if someone broke into Buckingham Palace and killed the queen in her sleep? I mean, the world would be on fire. So what if instead of the lowest, she was the highest? What if she was the queen? So I said, justice for the queen. And you see she's got the horns in her crown, you know. If you look, you'll see the horns in a lot of these pieces. You'll see them in Kaepernick's afro. You'll see them in Frederick's hair and Ali's hair. You see them abstracted in her hair. But I love the project because what we did was we sent them all over the world. So I organized printmakers at Pyramid Atlantic, where I have a studio. And to me, it was a return to the DNA of printmaking, which is democratic, and it was about sharing information. And so we worked together. I shared the separations with other printmakers in different places, and I made it downloadable as a PDF so people could use it without any, just print it out and use it. And so it was used in actions all over the world. And I also love that it was non-commercial. You can't buy it, you know. And I also love that, you know, some people probably got it, used it in that march, dropped it on the ground after that, never thought about it again. Yeah. Somebody else probably took it home and framed it, you know. Somebody else took it, as happened, and put it on Breonna Taylor's house, you know. And people were always telling me, oh, I saw it in the window of this restaurant or whatever. So just like all of these things, $0 bill, I mean, why would anyone buy that? Because it's only worth $0 anyway. I mean, like I enjoy that it's outside of this art predation industrial complex. Yeah.
Professor Gerima, I want to actually contrast and compare this process with Wilmington 10, your documentary. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your form of art is being used or was used for this social justice piece? And I know you could probably talk many hours about that also, but briefly.
It's not only that. I was hoping and dreading you wouldn't point that question towards me because I really don't agree with the idea of social justice art. It's a middle class invention because the middle class is the last class that would ever want real revolution. Yeah. I myself don't want revolution. If I don't finish my film, I say, wait till I finish my film and then revolution. So middle class people is just theatrical participation, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whatever we do, it's a donation like the way, rich feudal landlords in Europe used to feed the poor once a year or once every 100 years, give them bread, etc. For me, social justice is a middle-class phenomenon. A homeless person does not want, a homeless person wants the whole system to collapse. A homeless person wants revolution. Mm-hmm. At least their interest is revolution. So for me, I think I make films to inspire revolution. Okay. And it's also a middle-class proposition. Mm-hmm. So you're in or out. Once you start to use camera, not a gun, there's a whole dichotomy right there. Right. So for me, I just think that there are human beings. If you look at, for example, gentrification, there is all the gentrification forces, the well-to-do interracial white and black people, are forced. They demonstrate, they do their donation, they go for it, they go out, they walk their dog, they walk the demonstration. they walk over homeless people. Homeless people also, population grows, and it becomes the cannibal of the French Revolution. That, so we don't learn. In my view, I hope my film brings this contradiction. And really, a real revolution is very important. Otherwise, it is an acclimated arrangement that we are now facing. It's acclimated. It's a middle class that is fighting based on tuition. It's a middle class fighting for mortgage to go up or down. It's a mortgaged class that has nothing to do with its contradiction against capitalism. It's an incestuous coexistence. So I think it's very important not to be pretentious, not to be, to look at it nakedly. If you are homeless, you will not propose a gradual anything. No. For me, I walk with all my contradiction next to this growing, ever-growing homelessness. Me going to go to Stanford or Chicago to speak about film, driving by to go to the National Airport, homeless people, younger now, more, not even older, younger homeless people coming out, thrown out of the building and falling asleep on the sidewalk, and I'm going to lecture on cinema and this and that. That's a major contradiction the artist has confronted. So for me, social justice is not a word I just hope my work is not associated with that dubbing, but I think we should be fertilizers of revolution. That's the best I hope. I don't got the guts to be revolutionary like Fidel Castro or Che, but I would like to be a fertilizer, my work and me, to be a fertilizer of a revolution that could bring about a humane coexistence. Not a very, very, it's very oppressive to drive by certain areas. I've been in Washington over 50 years. The contradictions are very callous. Yeah. People they walk over starving people to eat escargot and this and that. And I am in it. And I'm saying, I think my camera is pointing a gun against my own contradiction, hopefully. And this is, I think, where we need to look. Our artwork should go towards this. I mean, we have more friends who are, Brad is a successful cinematographer, but he's frustrated about the contradictions he's facing. And for me, I think this is very important to bring. I know it might be the wrong neighborhood or this or that.
But I think
he dropped the mic on purpose. He didn't
forget
he's holding the mic.
I mean, so many incredible points. And the last thing that I really want for you all to discuss is the self-sustainable distribution methods. And that really brings us to the print that was created for this exhibition and in honor of the Millennium Arts Salon, the $0 bill, which is there in the center of the wall. I really want to get into a little bit of this conversation. Again, I know we only have an hour and we could talk about this for so long, but the self-sustainability and the commodification of art. And I think that really speaks to this fertilization of revolution that you're speaking of.
Yeah. Is that, should I answer that?
Yes. Yes, you should answer.
Well, okay. Here's what I would say, and I definitely am of the same school of thought as what you said. I'm just trying to, I remember Brother right? He asked the, how the Maasai jump, right? They jump. So he asked a Maasai, why do you jump? Did I tell you this? He said, why do you jump? He didn't ask a priest, he just asked a regular guy. Why do you jump like that all the time? He said, we're trying to hit the right spot because we're going back. Right? So I feel like I'm just jumping, just trying to hit the right spot. So I'm trying to hit the right frequency, finally, that makes the bridge fall down, you know? And so this piece here behind you that we talked about, like that was 2018, and that was, I was gonna do that portrait, and I said I told the sister, I wanna do you in a breathing apparatus. And she said, okay, if that's what you feel, that's what you do. And then the pandemic came, and people were like, oh, a couple people who knew were like, oh my God, you were gonna do her with the breathing apparatus 2 years ago. And people who know me like Chad would say that I've been telling people for at least a year before something's gonna happen. I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's nuclear, environmental, economic, climate, or what, but something's gonna happen. And I said it's gonna be like a reordering to the point where almost like what came before is out. And so people said to me, oh, well, you should do paintings with a mask on. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Everyone can do that now, you know? I'm gonna tell people about something they don't know about yet. Just like they didn't know about that at the time, you know? So that's what the $0 bill is about. Like, people don't understand it, but I say you will.
Well, isn't that a teaser?
You know, I'm not going to say too much about it. I'll just say that, and I know I said this to you, I try to think of an object, an item, that represents black people in this country, that is not an item that is not rooted in trauma or exploitation. And a lot of items that you would immediately think of as like emblematic of black people, when you really strip it back, is rooted in some type of trauma or exploitation. It's like, I remember when you said, there's no movie with a black child and an animal. A dog, a cat, a frog.
That was during Benji. Now we have another
I know.
situation.
I know. Well,
During Benji. When you were growing up.
I'm just saying the point is that so much of what we latch on to and even end up identifying ourselves with is really trauma-based and is not...
Yeah, but I want to say something about... I think to me, you know, in the very initiation of the contradiction of African people with white supremacy, it is the disfigurement of Africa that went to the soul of our identity. Mm-hmm. And that continued to keep us gyrating till now, even now more so. And for me, you take the ripped off image of Africa's, not image of Africa, but I would say this, the resistance identity of the Africans, and you restoring their Africanity. Mm. It's like the beginning of the struggle is in the restoration of the original erased essence. And so for me, majority of your work is about the restoration of, you don't give, I think to me, African people in the diaspora especially, and now more so in Africa, we have justified the mutilation of ourselves to accommodate white supremacists' idea of beauty and ugliness, demonized ugliness, etc. And then you restore this essentially African spirit in this iconic figures. And for me, a major contribution about you that I have felt very proud every time you came and showed me the new draft, whatever you're doing, is this. This to me, I think, sometimes gets to be downplayed because, you know, in the grammar of aesthetics, the battle of white supremacy gets to be elusive. It's very easy to fight the obvious. But what is surgically transplanted in our mindset literally has to take a guerrilla warfare inside our brain to liberate ourselves from white supremacy. And to me, this images you're snatching and imposing, whatever it's originating, is the biggest contribution you've made. That makes me very proud. Seriously, I wish most of our filmmakers could rise to some of, what you're achieving, but also what jazz left to struggle at. And so in movies, we have failed by and large to rise and occasion this combative, restoration of the initial things that was erased of ourselves, not only by the power of white supremacy, but by our own participation in altering our own aesthetics and beauty, And even now, a lot of like this Hollywood makeup, Ma Rainey, if you look at Sterling Brown's poetry on Ma Rainey, and then you look at this goddamn movie that's out, you just say, what the hell are they doing? They never understood the beauty of when you hear Sterling Brown, you say, woo! You just see how beautiful she is in the poetry. In the movie, they had to plastic her with so much to create what? She was ugly? We don't know. My wife and me are just said, we'll not touch it. We'll not watch this movie because there's this whole idea of taking black beauty. Black people did not just suddenly in Africa find themselves fighting with their blackness. It was a normal thing. When did we begin to fight with that is lost often. But it's also where the lobotomy took place.
I should drop it for you. You've said a mouthful and a brainful for us to think about, and I appreciate that. And I believe in giving people their flowers while they're here. So I thank you for this discussion.